Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's On the Sofa. I hope you're all enjoying the wonderful weather we're having, and hope it may continue. Tonight, we're privileged to have Scott Cuthbert on with us, so thank you to Scott for agreeing to join us. So what I'm going to do is bring Brick straight on. I don't think we've got anything to say, except we will be back next week, and that's about it, really. I don't think there's any news. Vic, have we got any news to say? I don't think we have we, this week?
No, we've been scouring to see if any new signings had happened today, but none that I can see. I kept up to date whilst watching Somerset play cricket today, which was an arduous day, but nonetheless. We should say thank you ever so much to Fools Rush In this evening, who will be starting at 9:30 to enable us to do this later version of On the Sofa. So we appreciate that very much, lads, and no doubt we'll be tuning into that later on.
Yeah. Always our friends over at Fools Rush In, we always communicate with them when we're doing something different, just to make sure we're not going to step on anybody's toes, and we have a really good relationship with them. So thank you again, all over on the Fools Rush In. Okay, so let's bring Scott on. Good evening, Scott.
Good evening. How are you?
All right, good.
All good. Good. Right, so if you've got any questions, please leave them in the comments. As I say every week, we'll get through as many as we can. Okay, Vic, I will leave you with Scott, and I will be back later.
Thanks very much indeed, Chris. Welcome along to the On the Sofa this evening, slightly later, but thank you ever so much for joining us. And Scott, welcome to you. Nice to talk to Swindon Town to you once again. And you might recognise a couple of shirts behind me that you wore, of course, during your time at the county ground. We were just discussing before you came on, this is your 21st pre-season, which started today, so you're well versed in that, aren't you?
It is, yeah. I think I've as I was saying, I think I've been through it all, experienced everything. Well, at least I think I've experienced everything, and yeah, even though it's my 21st, I still really enjoy it, strangely enough.
Still with Woking, a pretty good season last year, unfortunately not making the jump, but a decent season for you last year.
Yeah, I think it's difficult when you're losing a playoff, especially the eliminator, the way it is in the National League, a one-off game. It's not until the dust settles maybe 2 weeks after, and you have a little review of the season, and you look back and you think how well we've done. We were fantastic for large parts of the season. Really took a lot of teams by surprise with our performances and our results, and it was a massively positive season for the club, not just on the pitch, but off the pitch as well. So, disappointing the way it ended, but thankfully there's another opportunity to go again this year. And, with Notts County and Wrexham being out of the league, hopefully it gives other teams some opportunities to be up there fighting for first place.
I was going to say, the attention on the National League last season was immense, wasn't it? Because of the two clubs you've mentioned. So at least people are now, interested in the National League, perhaps where they weren't before.
Perhaps, yeah. I think that's probably the positive thing that came out of Ryan Reynolds. Obviously, buying Wrexham and the amount of publicity that they had was fantastic for the league. And I think, last year was my first year in the league, but certainly talking to the lads who've played in here before, they talk about how professional it's got. And I think that obviously comes down the leagues, feeds down the leagues in terms of the money and whatnot and the resources that they've got to use. And it's certainly, listen, there's still a couple of part-time teams in there. But when you look at the top half of the table, there's 11 or 12 really strong teams in this league, even without Wrexham and Notts County. So it's going to be a very strong and competitive league this year.
Yeah, and that's indicated by the fact that the clubs that went down were former league clubs, I think, weren't they? They went down to National League South. So, that shows you the strength of the league, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's difficult. There's no easy place to go. I know it's a cliche, but there's no easy place to go. A lot of difficult grounds, hard teams to play against. They're always well organised, well coached nowadays. It's not like the old school where you go there and you're playing against 4-4-2, big 6'4" players, and sticking it in the channel and sticking it into the box every chance that they get. They try and play football, and they make it difficult for you. So it's no surprise that teams who have been up in the Football League are struggling, and obviously getting relegated down to the National League South or North.
Well, we wish you well for the forthcoming campaign and good luck with the pre-season. I'm sure you know what's ahead, and it's a necessary evil, I think it's fair to say, isn't it?
That is. You've just got to do it. You've got to do it. I think in the olden days, like I was saying, the olden days you used to use pre-season to get fit, but now, you know, again with the amount of resources that the players have got, they come back really, really fit and really at it. So the older you get, the more you have to look after yourself and make sure you come back in as good a condition as you can be. So, but yeah, looking forward to it.
Right, well, let's turn the clock back. You were born in Alexandria in Scotland, which is that in Dumfries, is that right? Have I got my geography? Oh, sorry, I got it wrong.
Just a couple of hours south. No, that's just outside Glasgow.
Fair enough.
Just close to a place called Dumbarton.
Dumbarton.
15 minutes from where I grew up.
I knew there was a DU in there somewhere. I got them mixed up. So that's where you were born. Your first club, of course, was Celtic, which you were 11 when you joined Celtic. But you were telling us just now you weren't of a hoops persuasion. So how did that work out?
No, my dad's side of the family were Celtic fans. My mum's side of the family were Rangers fans, and I was brought up supporting Rangers. I never had a season ticket, but some of my family did, and I remember going to some of the games. I remember Paul Gascoigne's first pre-season game against Stoya Bucharest. They played like a kind of 4-team tournament, and I remember watching Gaza with his blonde hair against Stoya Bucharest. So yeah, and I had all the videos. I had Mark Catley, Ali McCoist. I had all like the treble winning Rangers sides and the almost the 10 in a row side as well. So yeah, I grew up a Rangers supporter. So when I signed for Celtic, a little bit strange, probably stranger for other people than it was for me. At the end of the day, it was just football. I love playing football, and I didn't particularly care who it was with as long as I was enjoying it. And I'm glad I had that mindset, because it ended up being a fantastic upbringing for myself from a footballing point of view. You know, the tournaments that you play in, the players that you get to play against, and the players you get to play with when you're older. So it was a fantastic experience all round for me.
Yeah, I've recently read Pat Nevin's biography, and I mean, he obviously grew up with Celtic as well. So, you know, I guess if you're a boy in Scotland, the club to go to is either Celtic or Rangers, isn't it?
It is. That's the draw. They're massive. I think they're world renowned. How big they are. You know, we used to go on tours and obviously in Ireland because there's a big following there. But we used to go to Asia. We used to go to America, Canada, and the fans would be there in their thousands. So, you know, they're massive clubs, and you know, everyone's dream is to play football and play for the biggest club that they can. And if you grow up in Glasgow, you grow up in Scotland, then Celtic and Rangers are the two teams that you want to play for.
You went out on loan to a couple of Scottish teams, didn't you? But you did almost get on in an Old Firm derby, didn't you? You very nearly made your Celtic debut.
I did, yeah, I did. I was having a bit of issues at right back. And I can't remember who was playing right back. It wasn't a player who usually plays right back. He was struggling a little bit, and I got the goal warm up shout, and my heart sank because it was at Ibrox, and it's quite a scary place just to warm up in. Never mind playing, but unfortunately, I never got told to get stripped and get on. But I think they lost. I think they lost it 3-0. I think Rangers beat them 3-0. So maybe it worked out for the best.
Yeah, how was that experience? Because I assume you run along the touchline, did you? And in front of Rangers fans or Celtic? I mean, a lot of them, they don't go to away games now, do they? There seems to be some sort of, you know, only one set of fans in the ground. But how was it then? I guess a bit febrile.
No, I think that ruling that they brought in is really disappointing not just for the fans, but for the players. It used to be unbelievable when you went to Ibrox and Celtic had the full stand behind the goal. The atmosphere was just brilliant, and it was the same likewise when Rangers came to Celtic Park and they filled the stand behind the goal. So it's taken away a little bit from the from the atmosphere, I feel. But yeah, it was very intimidating. Even just warming up, even just running out the tunnel for the warm up, and you're not well known. No one really knows you. You're just a young boy, but the dog's abuse you got. It was something. It was some experience.
Is that something you kind of? It's quite a lesson in life because, you know, as a footballer, you know what it's like. You get abuse in the crowd, etc., etc. Is that a kind of early lesson for you?
Yeah, it's a little bit different when you're young and you're not playing. So the abuse isn't directly aimed at you individually, you know, in terms of your performance or whatever. But it's not until you start playing regularly, and it's great when things are going well because everyone's clapping and cheering and whatnot and singing. But yeah, when it goes wrong, it's you certainly know about it. And when individuals in the crowd pick you out for a little bit of abuse, obviously it's listen, it goes with the territory when you're a player. But when you're young, it certainly does have an effect on you. As you get older and a little bit wiser and a little bit thicker skin, you learn to ignore it and get on with your life. But when it's young, it's certainly, it can be a little bit harsh at times.
And I guess you cut a lot of it out anyway when you're playing, don't you? I don't know.
Yeah, when you're younger, you seem to you cut out a lot of things. I always feel that when you're younger, you cut out the things that are probably important. To be honest, you know the how big the game is, if it's on TV, if it's you're going for promotion or whatever. You seem to forget all that. It's not until you get older you think about all these things, because they affect your life. Promotions, relegations, and whatnot. They have a massive effect on your career and your life. But when you're younger, well, I certainly did. I probably focused a little bit too much on the negative praise and whatever, the negative and the positive stuff that was getting said, rather than the occasion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Message from Craig. Hello, Craig. Hello, Scott from East Dunbartonshire. Kirkintilloch, to be precise, and a member of the Scottish branch of the STFC Supporters Club. Nice to see Scotland doing so well in the Euro qualifiers. Of course, you did represent Scotland at various levels, we should say. Scotland B, under 21, under 19, under 20. So you must be pleased that Scotland having a bit of a rebirth, aren't they, under Steve Clarke?
Yeah, I'm absolutely delighted. I think I watched the game last year, I think it was, and I remember texting my mate saying that this is the first time I've watched a Scotland side where you can genuinely think that we've got 4 or 5 top class players. You look at John McGinn, Kieran Tierney, Andy Robertson, Scott McTominay. They are top players in my opinion. So add in the fact that we've got some other very good players. Sorry, Callum McGregor, I'll add to that list as well. Add in the fact that we've got some really, really good professional players. There seems to be a good team spirit about the place, which I think is always hard to kind of replicate in an international setting. And Steve Clarke's done an unbelievable job. He done unbelievable at Kilmarnock, and he's carried that on to Scotland, and it's looking good for the Euros. We obviously qualified for the Euros last time. We're a little bit disappointed with how it happened. What happened in the group stages, but it's looking positive, and it's great. It's great. If there's a good international team, it's great for the country. Kids can watch the games, and they've got a team and they've got a group of players to look up to, and that's great for the young children growing up wanting to be footballers in Scotland. Yeah,
we should say, of course, very sad news about Craig Brown today, passing away at the age of 82. So he did a fabulous job as Scotland manager too, didn't he? So we should say that's very sad news today. We pay tribute to him.
Yeah, he was an absolute legend. It's probably my first memory of watching Scotland. I was watching him at Euro '96 and the World Cup, and of course he was the manager of both of them, and he's obviously still the last manager to get Scotland to a World Cup. So now he's an absolute legend, and it's obviously it's a shame to hear about his passing.
Definitely. Right, so you go out on loan to a couple of clubs, and you got your first professional goal for Livingston, I believe. So when you're a youngster and you dream of scoring a goal in a league match in your back garden, what's that moment feel like?
Well, I went to Livingston because I was just back from a double hernia operation, and I needed minutes, I needed games. There was a lot of reserve games getting called off at the time. So the reserve manager called me or pulled me in and said, "You're going on loan to Livingston for a month." They were in the Championship; they'd just been relegated, and I just went there to get fit, to be honest. But I remember my goal was a header. We lost 3-1. It was a terrible game, like an awful game. I remember playing, thinking, "Oh, this is terrible," even to play in. But it was really good. I had my grandpa, my dad, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and her dad in the crowd watching. So it was great, and it was my grandpa's birthday party that night. So back at my mum and dad's house, I was able to go back and celebrate with the family and stuff, and it was a great occasion. Yeah,
definitely to get a goal at any level. 3-1 defeat to Airdrie, though, sadly, as I understand. Yeah. So after playing for Celtic at certain levels and captaining, I think, at certain levels, your time at Parkhead comes to a close. Was that how did that come about?
I was I'd went on loan the year before to St Mirren in the SPL, and absolutely loved it. That was just brilliant. I just loved playing first team football. I was playing in the SPL. I was loving it, and I had a year left in my contract. And of course, when you're under the age of 24, you can't leave on a free. So I knew that there would be a contract offer to keep me until I was 24, but I was really keen to get. I just felt I was ready to go out and play men's football, and and I was, obviously, agents do their work. Agents talk to managers, and actually, at Swindon at the time, George Wood was a goalkeeper coach, and George Wood done a lot of scouting for the Scottish national teams and stuff, and he'd watched me play for, I think it was the Scotland 19s and the 20s, and he'd actually recommended me to Swindon, to Danny Wilson. So that's how it came about, and I kind of found out about Swindon's interest. I think it was about a month before the season ended. I was still playing with St Mirren, and I heard about the interest. And my aim was always to go down south. I always wanted to go down south and kind of challenge myself, and hopefully one day play in the Championship. And then at that time, you wanted to go and play in the Premier League, because that's the best, still is, the big league. So that's how it came about.
So what did you know of Swindon? I mean, obviously there've been Celtic connections, Paul Caddis, of course, and Simon Ferry. What did you know of the town?
Nothing at all. Sorry, to go back to rewind a year previously, before I went on loan to St Mirren, Maurice Malpass was the manager.
Right.
Maurice was my under-21 manager at Scotland, and he wanted me to come on loan, but it just never happened. Nothing kind of worked out. But from that time, I'd started doing a little bit of research. I knew a little bit. I found out about the Magic Roundabouts.
Yeah.
Obviously the stadium. I'd learned that they'd been in the Premier League in '92. Some of the players that had played for them. So I knew, I did, when Danny Wilson contacted me, I knew a little bit about the club, but I knew nothing about the town other than the roundabouts.
Which you quickly got used to doing, I should imagine. So you eventually do sign, although St Mirren, I think, were quite keen to sign you anyway, weren't they? Did they want to keep you there?
They were, but obviously because I wasn't out of contract and I wasn't a free, they were struggling to pay the transfer fee. So it's kind of boiled down to the fact that Swindon were willing to pay the transfer fee for me, and that's what kind of sped that along a little bit.
Fair enough. So you arrive in Wiltshire, you arrive at the county ground. Now, I've got to say, your Swindon career didn't get off to a great start, did it, if I remember rightly? Being in the away end on a sunny Kent lunchtime, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, nearly kick-off.
Yeah. It was the same day, you might remember, that Norwich were thrashed by Colchester 7-1.
That's right.
And that was the only reason that Swindon weren't bottom of the table after that first day. What do you remember of your debut that afternoon?
Almost everything. This is going to sound like I'm making excuses, but I signed for Swindon after another double hernia operation and a groin operation. So I'd just stepped up my rehab and I'd signed for Swindon, passed my medical, went to Austria pre-season, never trained. And then my first game was, we played on a Tuesday night before the season started. I can't remember who against. And I think I played about 20-30 minutes at right back, and not expecting to start the season, to be honest. I just wasn't ready. And then Danny Wilson, as Danny Wilson done, he's done shape on the Friday, and I was playing right back, and Kevin Amanko was playing right wing. And I was like, oh, God, I'm not sure about this, but obviously being young and naive, I didn't want to hold my hands up and say I wasn't fully fit. And I remember getting to the stadium, I thought it was a good crowd, because Gillingham's always a good atmosphere when you're playing there. I remember it being roasting, and the first half was the longest half of my life. I think I might have got taken off at half time, or not long after it. It was horrendous. Every time I touched the ball, I kicked out a player, I kicked it to a Gillingham player. Every time they attacked, they seemed to score. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible.
Yeah, it's pretty horrible in the away end as well. I can
I bet it was.
On that temporary stand, which is still there, unbelievably. So what did you think of League One then, or whatever it was called in those days? I can't remember.
Well, I thought, if this is the standard and we're going to get beat like this every week, this is very good. This is a lot better than what I thought it was going to be. But luckily we had a really good team, and that was just a kind of off day. And but yeah, I thought straight away, the pace was frantic. It was 100 mile per hour compared to what I was used to. And I thought, right, well, that's going to take a little bit of getting used to. And it never let off, to be honest, all through the season. That was just kind of set the tone for the rest of the year.
What an extraordinary start to an extraordinary season when you think about it. And you can draw a comparison with Norwich, of course, who then went on to win the league title after that disastrous start by getting the manager of Colchester back in to manage them, which is
Paul Lambert.
Yeah, exactly. So it was all a bit odd, really. I remember Danny Wilson coming towards the supporters at the end and going like that. But from there, I think if I remember rightly, went on to win at MK Dons in the League Cup the following Tuesday, 4-1.
Yeah.
I think you missed out for a few games, and then you came back for the Wolves League Cup tie at Molineux. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Which was a fabulous performance because they were a Premier League team, and you held them to 0-0.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that game. That's right. Danny pulled me after the Gillingham game and said, "I'm going to sit you out for a few weeks. You're not fit." It's not it's not your fault. It's my fault. I shouldn't have played you. So I sat there. I remember being on the bench for MK Oldham. I think there was one other as well. And I played against Wolves. That was a really good experience. That was a good crowd, good atmosphere, even though it was a League Cup game. And I remember us playing really, really well.
Yeah, he did. Lost some penalties, sadly, which was a real shame. But from then on, the season kind of picked up. Why do you think that was? What was the sort of turning point? Obviously, that defeat on the opening day of the season would have been a kick up the collective backsides. But what do you think it was that turned it suddenly around?
I think it was a new group. I think if you look at the team, Dave Lucas, myself, Simon Ferry, Jonathan Douglas, I think Gordon Greer might have been on loan the previous year, but he was still a new player. I think it was Al Sheen in by then. We had a lot of new players, and sometimes it takes a little bit of time to gel. That's just what happens, and it took us a little bit of time to get going. I even remember after the Wolves game, it was still a little bit of a sticky, maybe a month. I remember losing back-to-back games like Hartlepool, Norwich away, and then Charlie came in. Charlie Austin came in, and Charlie and Billy just straight away just clicked. Hit it off. Charlie scored against Carlisle away. I remember. I think it was his first start, and I just think if you've got goals in your team in any league, if you've got players who can create and score goals, then you're always going to have a good team. And that's what happened to us. We just started scoring a lot of goals, creating a lot of chances, and just ended up being a very, very good team.
Yeah, you mentioned Charlie there. I mean, he made his debut at Norwich, if I remember right. He came on as a sub. But then that first league start at Carlisle, when there was a bit of doubt whether the match would actually start or not, because if you remember, there were huge floods in Cumbria. And it was not really sure whether it was going to start. But hey, Charlie Austin, after 3 minutes, good start, 1-0 win. Yeah,
I always remember playing Norwich away. I think we got beat 2-0 against Norwich. At that time, they were doing well. And Charlie came on for the last 10-15 minutes. And I remember the manager, Danny, saying after the game, he's like, Charlie was the only player that came out of it with praise. Someone who showed a little bit of bottle, got down the line and put in a great cross. And I remember him praising him quite highly, and I thought the chances are that, when a manager says that after a game, Charlie's probably a shoe-in to start the next game. And he did. He got his chance and he took it, and he certainly never looked back after that.
Yeah, he's had a decent career, I think it's fair to say.
He's done all right for himself.
He's done all right. He's back at the county ground now, of course.
That's right. Yeah.
How important are partnerships in football? Because you mentioned, Billy Painter, he had a great partnership with Simon Cox before Charlie Austin. How important are partnerships, not only up in front, but in a defence as well? Because Gordon Greer, of course, a rock at the back of the defence. You had Gordon as a partner, you had Jean-Francois Lessenal as well. How important are those partnerships?
I think it's massive over a course of a season. Of course, injuries happen, suspensions happen, and players drop in and out and whatnot. But I think it's really important that you've got your two centre backs, you've got your set midfield, and you've got your two. I know nowadays a lot of teams play with one striker, but you've got your two strikers that can work off each other, know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and can adapt to any kind of games that that come up. So it's massively important, and certainly for myself, I've been fortunate to play with quite a lot of good players, and Gordy went on to have a fantastic career with Brighton. Gordy was one of the players where I wouldn't necessarily, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but you wouldn't really pick him as a standout in games. You wouldn't think he's done anything extraordinary, but what he always brought to the team was a massive level of composure. He was always composed on the ball, He was really aggressive when he had to be, and he was a leader. He was a captain. He was, he was an organizer, and he was great to play next to, and he was great to learn off of. I didn't realise at the time that I was learning off him, but it's not until you look back that you realise that I did pick up a lot of things from him.
We'll talk about Charlton away in a little while, because that was a very important moment with Gordon Greer, wasn't it? But there were two notable victories, of course. Many people will remember this, and the chant 6-0 on aggregate is one that sticks in people's minds. 3-0 wins over Leeds. I mean, they were both incredible performances that night at the county ground, and then, goodness me, at Ellen Road again. They were standout results, weren't they?
Yeah, that's my standout game, to be honest. I don't know if that question is going to get asked, but they two games, I think the Huddersfield runs it close, but because at home that was a great atmosphere. But the Leeds game at home, it was a packed county ground, and playing against they're probably not massive stars, but because they were Leeds United, you thought they were, and to play the way we did and to beat them 3-0 was fantastic. And then to go up to Ellen Road, I'm sure it was an Easter weekend, went up there and to 25,000 at Ellen Road, and it was just fantastic. They're the two kind of standout games for me.
What was it that, I mean, the football played up Ellen Road was fabulous, but that night at the county ground, it was just, as a fan, it was everything you wanted. I mean, a fabulous atmosphere, fabulous football, 3-0. When you mentioned Huddersfield, there was an FA Cup tie, of course, a 4-1 win in that cup tie at home, which was another great result that season. Yeah. What was it about those games? As a player, is it one that you give a bit extra in, or is that not fair to say because you give extra in every game? But do they bring a bit more out of you?
My memory of the game at the county ground was just the atmosphere. I thought the atmosphere was electric. That was the first kind of game that I've played in where it was just noise for 90 minutes, and they really drove us on. And I remember the game again, typical League One game. It was frantic. It was 100 mile per hour. We were at them non-stop, and just the whole occasion was electric and fast paced, and there was just such a buzz. Ellen Road was a little bit different because you go there as an away player, and just walking out the tunnel and the Leeds fans singing, was it Marching On Together? They sang. It was kind of surreal because I'd watched it before in the past. I saw, growing up, I had the Leeds top, the yellow one that they got to the Champions League semi-final, and I had that when I was a young boy. So it's quite surreal to walk out in Ellen Road and to play against Leeds, because regardless of what league they're in or what players you're playing against, you're still playing against Leeds United. So yeah, it was really surreal.
Yeah, incredible. Now, that season, what was it that sort of, at the end, it was a disappointing run which led to the playoffs? Because in my mind, that side should have gone automatically up. Is that fair to say?
Oh, definitely. When I always remember beating Leeds. There wasn't many games to play, and we went second. And I thought, here we go, we're going to do it. And we just slipped away. We drew with Walsall at home, I remember. I drew with someone else, or get beat off for someone else, and we just let it slip. Yeah, it was disappointing because we had good enough players and a good enough team to get promoted automatically, and we should have, because the pressure was on Leeds. The pressure was on them because they were expected to get promoted. They're the ones that were a bit of trouble after we beat them. So yeah, you look back and we should have done it. We should have done it automatically, but we still had an opportunity in the playoffs, of course. But it just wasn't to be.
What sort of started that stumble? Can you put your finger on it then? Is it easy as a player to do that, or are there a numerous amount of reasons for it to happen like that?
I don't know, to be honest. I don't know if it was a case of we were the chasing team. And when you're the chasing team, you've got something to aim for, you've got something to claw back at. And then when you do finally get to that position, you then become the team that's going to be chased. And it's a completely different mindset and a completely different mentality to have. And perhaps we just never quite switched our mentality enough, or as well as we should have, and slipped up. Maybe didn't really realise the importance of the when you go from playing in front of 25,000 at Ellen Road to then, and that's no disrespect, you go to play in front of 78,000 at the county ground against Walsall. It's a little bit different. So whether that had an impact, I don't know. But it wasn't for the want of trying. The lads certainly never drew or lost games on purpose. It was just one of those things where results never quite went our way.
The playoffs then, the first game at home against Charlton Athletic, 2-1, I think it was, on that first one. Vincent Perigard had a great chance right at the end to sort of seal the deal. Going to the Valley on the Monday, then you must have felt room of the shout here. How did you feel?
Well, I always remember just obviously leading it from the first leg. I got a really bad dead leg in the first leg, so I was nursing my dead leg, and I thought I was going to be struggling to play the second leg. So I remember limping through training, not admitting that I was struggling, and going home every day beside to the house and wrapping a big bandage around my leg and icing it to try and get the swelling down. And it was agony. I remember being agony going to the stadium, and I'm thinking, I'm not going to be able to get through this. And for some reason, I went out to warm up, and it just disappeared. I think a little bit of adrenaline and a little bit of just, my mind being elsewhere, it disappeared. And I always remember thinking, just don't concede early. Just don't concede an early goal. Keep it tight. Don't concede. Frustrate them. We're the away side. The fans will be behind them. If they score early, they'll have a bit of momentum. So I just always remember in my head, whether that was a game plan, it probably wasn't, because we never really set up to be that kind of team. But I remember the first half being really difficult. I remember really struggling. I remember Danny Wilson having a pop at us, me individually actually, and the team. Just a bit of performance. It just wasn't quite good enough.
The second leg, then, well, that blue shirt behind me is kind of synonymous with that second leg, isn't it? And let's go back to there were two incidents, really. The David Lucas injury, Phil Smith comes in, and the Gordon Greer sending off. I mean, there were huge moments in that game, weren't they? Yeah,
I'll be honest, I can't remember Dave Lucas getting injured. That's shocking. I can remember Goldie Greer's karate kick to the chest. I can remember that. That sticks out, because I'd went for a kind of hit. I think I'd went tight with, what was the boy's name? Burton, was it? Dion
Burton, yeah.
I'd went tight with him and kind of get caught under the ball, and the ball's bounced, and it's kind of one of the, should I go for it? Should Goldie go for it? And Goldie's decided just to hang a big foot in and caught Dion. As soon as he done it, I knew he was off. And that was obviously a massive moment, because you think, well, playoff game. Were we drawn? I think we were drawn at the time.
Yeah.
So we thought, momentum's going to swing to Charlton's in Charlton's favour. We're going to end up losing this. To go from winning the first leg to now losing it. Oh God, all kind of things go through your head. But we managed to pull it back at the death.
Certainly did. I mean, that extra time, and then of course those penalties, which Stephen Darby scored the penalty, which took you to Wembley, and we wish him well, of course, in his battle at the moment. What was the atmosphere like after that? Because it was a momentous game, and you had thousands of Swindon fans just going bonkers behind that away end. What was the atmosphere like afterwards?
Brilliant. I remember because I've got family that live in Essex, and I think it was my brother came down for the game with, I think it was his mate. So the two of them were in the crowd. So I remember seeing them in the crowd, the away end. And you mentioned the top behind you, but that game, my whole kind of memory of that game is seeing Darbs scoring the penalty and running away in his face and everyone running towards him. That's my kind of everlasting memory of that game. And obviously, when you win a playoff semi-final, it's not party time, but you can celebrate a little bit because you've got that kind of gap before the final comes. You've got the 10-day period. So yeah, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. I remember being back in the changing room and Billy Painter, as Billy does, was singing and shouting and stripping off, and there was waters going everywhere and everyone. It was amazing. Like I said, there were so many highs and lows. To go from winning the first leg to going a goal down to the sending off, Dave Lucas getting injured, to then winning it on penalties. Losing it on penalties is probably the worst thing you can ever imagine, but to win it on penalties is just fantastic. So it was a great night and a special night.
Definitely. To the final then, and to Wembley, that wasn't a special night, was it? It wasn't a great game. We all remember the Charlie Austin bobble, which is to this day, I know, brings them out in a cold sweat. How was it for the players? Because it was a disappointing afternoon, wasn't it? Just a 1-0 defeat.
Well, that's my memory. That's my memory of the game, is the bobble. I just remember Charlie taking the ball off of Paul Robinson, running through, and I just thought, Charlie's scoring this. He always scores. And then I was right behind it, and I saw the bobble, and I saw it hit his shin, and I thought, how's your luck? How's your luck? But no, it wasn't a great game. To be honest, I always tell people I never really took it all in. To be honest, I never we'd spoken at the start about not kind of understanding the magnitude of the game or whatever. never really knew what I was playing for. I never really realised what was at stake, and I suppose it's just a kind of naivety. Of course, I remember the game. I always remember the Swindon and Millwall were allowed their own announcers to come to the game and announce the players. So we were warming up and they were announcing our names, and I remember the cheer from the Swindon fans, and I remember saying to myself, this is a proper game, that's a good atmosphere. And then they played a couple of the Swindon songs that they play at the county ground, so I remember all that. But obviously the result wasn't great. We knew we were playing against. Millwall were a group of men that had been in the league before. They were seasoned pros. They were horrible to play against. If they took the lead, they would make it so difficult for you to get back in the game, and that's what it proved. And I think after their goal, we kind of huffed and puffed without really creating too many. Apart from Charlie's chance, I can't really remember there being another chance.
Yeah, of course, you played them in the league a couple of weeks before that as well, hadn't you?
Yeah, we lost 3-2.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the summer comes, as always, with the playoffs, of course. It means a shorter summer, doesn't it? Optimism is high. Gordon Greer departs. And I hate to use the term second season syndrome, but boy, that term applies, doesn't it? Because if I said it all went horribly wrong, it didn't go terribly right, did it?
No, I don't think from start to finish there was an awful lot that went right, to be honest. And without saying, again, it's not Gordon's fault because he moved. He got a good move and he went to Brighton and he was successful. But I think Gordon was the kind of start of it all. I think I always remember Gordy leaving and everyone was a bit surprised that he'd went. And I remember thinking, well, I played next to him all last season. Who's he going to bring in to replace him? Kind of waiting, and no one really came. And that was kind of the start of it all kind of unravelling. That was even before the season started.
Sean Morrison, I think, was the man nominated, wasn't he? And a young player. Again, inexperienced. I mean, what happens when you lose somebody like Gordon Greer? Because as you've mentioned before, not only have you lost a player, but you've lost an influence in the dressing room. Is that kind of one of the bottom lines of this? The dressing room kind of unravelled. Is that fair to say?
The dressing room never unravelled at that stage. It never unravelled at that stage because it was still early on. There was still optimism. But certainly there was kind of questions getting asked, thinking, like, well, who are we going to bring in? Who's going to... Sean's went on and had an unbelievable career. Absolutely fantastic. He was a really good player. But if you look at it, I was 23. I'd played maybe 50 games. Sean had only played a handful of games at that time. He was even younger than me. So you're thinking, right, well, we've lost our experience in the back line. We've lost our captain. We're kind of looking for him to be replaced. And like I said, it never quite happened. It never. And obviously we started the season against Brighton. And I remember playing in a game and thinking, this isn't the Swindon that I played in last year. This is certainly not the Swindon team that I played in last year. And I thought, this is going to be difficult this year. Second season syndrome, everyone knows who Swindon are. Everyone knows who the players are. They know the style of play. And they're ready to play against you. They want to beat you. This goes back to everyone wants to chase you. Everyone wants to beat you so they can say, well, we beat Swindon. They were in a playoff final last year. They've got so-and-so playing for them. So we had a target on our back. And the problem was we weren't as good as what we were. So that was a big issue.
Yeah, you lost to Brighton, I think, on the opening day, didn't you? And that kind of did set the tone in many ways. Certainly from a fan's point of view, it turned out to be a very disappointing season. And of course, for Danny Wilson, it turned out to be very disappointing in the end because he departed. And how were the players with Danny Wilson? I mean, we've interviewed him on here. I spoke to him many times over the course of those 2 seasons. And a great deal of respect for him, and I'm sure the players did too. What were you feeling when he departed?
I was gutted because he brought me to the club, and I'd been at Celtic when a manager had been sacked, but I wasn't in the first team environment. I wasn't playing week in, week out, so I never kind of experienced it firsthand. So this was my first experience of a manager getting sacked because of our performances, because we weren't playing well. I felt really sorry for him because he was a good guy. And I do think, in all honesty, a lot of the things were out of his control. You talk about Gordon leaving, but Billy Painter left and wasn't replaced. Danny Ward left. I know he was on loan, but he went back, wasn't replaced. Charlie Austin left in the January, wasn't replaced. Sean Morrison left in the January, he wasn't replaced. So when I say he wasn't replaced, he was replaced, but I didn't think the recruitment was anywhere near as good as what it should have been. And that I think ultimately that's why we paid the price, was because our recruitment just wasn't right. So yeah, obviously managers do pay the price because they're the main men, but there was a lot of other issues, not just including individual performances or team performances, but a lot of things in the background that weren't right.
Yeah, you mentioned Danny Ward there, and I was going to say during that playoff camp, I mean, he was fabulous, wasn't he, Danny Ward? I mean, what a player. And I know he would have crawled back to Swindon given the opportunity. He had a decent career too, didn't he? Yeah. What a player he was.
He did.
Yeah.
He did. Well, you look at the team, Danny Ward, who must have scored or at least been involved in 15, 20 goals. Charlie Austin, who got touching on 30, and Billy Painter. Yeah. You're talking nearly 50, 60, no, more than that, maybe 70 goals in a season, and we lost that. By January, we had that. That was all out of the team. So it's very hard to, if your recruitment's not right, then it's very hard to replace that type of goals.
Actually, you can draw a comparison with the season before last for Swindon when they lost 30-odd goals and didn't really replace him for the last campaign. You know, you can draw a comparison. When you say things weren't right, there are a lot of talks of cliques within the dressing room. I mean, can you talk about that? Can you tell us, is that true? Were there cliques?
No, I don't think so. I certainly don't think the second season was a very good changing room. I can't remember them being so much as a clique. You know, as always, when things are going bad, dressing rooms aren't good. Let's be honest. If you're losing and you're in the bottom four or you're near the bottom, changing rooms are not a good place to be, because you don't particularly like each other because you're not playing well. You're making mistakes, you're not scoring chances, you're losing games week in, week out, you're getting dogs abuse from supporters, you're getting dogs abuse from the manager. So it's a horrible place to be. But I can't hand on heart, I can't remember there being any kind of cliques in the group. There was certainly lads who were more vocal and lads who probably weren't as vocal, and maybe the lads who weren't as vocal maybe kind of felt that there was a kind of group that were perhaps teaming up or whatever, but I never experienced that.
Fair enough. So Paul Hart comes in. I remember it was very close to being the worst run a Swindon team had ever had. They got a win at Brentford late on in the season. How did you get on with Paul Hart?
Well, not great. Not great. I don't think I wasn't playing well at the time. I was playing awful. I was really low in confidence and just wasn't playing great. So we never got off to a great start. I wouldn't say he didn't like me. But I certainly didn't think that I was his cup of tea in terms of a player, because I think I only played a couple of games and then I was left out, and I might have came back in and never played well again. But it wasn't an enjoyable period that time. It wasn't, because, like I said, lads were low in confidence, the club were low. Manager has just been sacked. A new manager comes in, he's trying to change certain things. Some lads left, a couple went on loan and stuff. So it was a difficult period for everyone, and it wasn't enjoyable. The only bit of memory I remember from Paul Hart's managerial career was Calvin Andrews scoring from about 30 yards at Griffin Park. I remember that. I was on the bench and I was like, what a goal, because he hadn't scored. And it's funny because Paul Hart ended up being the assistant at Luton when I was there. So I had a terrible first year at Luton. Sorry, I know we're talking about Swindon, but I had a terrible first year at Luton. I came in second season, I was injured, and I walked down the tunnel and I see Paul Hart standing at the opposite side, and I was like, no, surely not. I thought, here we go again. But it ended up being okay. We ended up doing well and getting promoted, and he was actually a really good guy. I actually got to know him a lot better, because as a manager it's difficult to have a relationship with players, but as an assistant he was brilliant. He was a great guy and someone that I've got a lot of respect for.
Fair enough. Calvin Andrew, that goal, I think it could have been 18 straight games without a victory, or pretty close to it. So that game ended that run. Relegation followed at Sheffield Wednesday.
Yeah.
So it comes to the end of the season, and your departure from Swindon Town. Now, there's been much said and written about this. Can you actually clear this up? Did you want to leave? Did you say you were moving to a bigger club? How did it all come about? Because, as you know, your relationship with Town fans after this has not been great, has it? You know, you are the pantomime villain in many respects, if I might put it like that.
I think it all started when I first got Twitter, and silly boy, young, didn't know what Twitter was. I remember my bio was from Claybank, slumming it in Swindon, which in my mind was nothing to do with Swindon. If you knew where I grew up, you know how rough parts of Glasgow is, that was paradise. Swindon was paradise compared to that. So it was just a joke between friends, and I think people took a dislike to that and thought that I never liked the place and stuff like that, and that certainly wasn't the case. And I want to apologise for that if anyone took offence for that, even though it was years ago. But no, the season ended, and of course I had an awful year. They'd offered me a new contract probably about the midway term. And before things started going really wrong, they'd offered me a new 3-year contract, and I was going to sign it. But then Swindon pulled it because of the situation, because I was obviously not playing well. And they thought, let's hold off and see what happens. Got relegated. I remember Paul Bowden pulled me and said, what's your plans for next year? And I went, I've got no plans. I've not spoke to my agent. I've not spoke to anyone. He says, do you want to stay? I went, yeah, of course I do. I was part of the reason why this club get relegated. I want to get us back promoted. I was like, oh, that's good to know. That's good to know. I'll tell the board. That that's what you want to do. And that was it. And obviously went away for the summer. I spoke to my agent. My agent said, well, they're still appointing a manager. They've not appointed a manager yet. Once they appoint the manager... No, sorry. It was... I can't remember the guy's name. But he ended up being the chairman of the club, but he was a director.
Andrew Fitton?
It might be him. It might be him. It was a guy, bald-haired like myself. No?
Jeremy Ray?
Honestly,
yeah, okay.
He was a really good guy. I really liked him. I thought he was a real honest guy. And he told my agent, said, listen, we'll wait until the manager gets appointed. Once the manager's appointed, he will look at the squad and he'll be in contact. And I thought, that's fine. And then Di Canio got announced. And I thought, right, that's good. Manager announced. Let's wait and see. And I think about a week passed by. I'm back down in Swindon. I'm back from my holiday. I'm sitting there on my agent phones. And he said, hi Scott, how's things? Fine, holiday fine, small talk. And he went, I've just had a conversation with the club. Di Canio says he doesn't want you. And he's going to release you. I went, all right. And he says, that's it. And there was no conversation from the club. I had no notification from the club or anything. That was it. That was my agent saying, so we'll need to move on. And he gave it the old agent talk. I'm speaking to this club, that club. We'll get your future sorted in due course. So, no, long answer, but no, I never had any intentions of leaving the club. I enjoyed it, even though it was a poor season. I still enjoyed being at the club. My partner, my wife, she had a job there and stuff like that. So, no, at no point did I want to leave or actively want to leave or all that kind of stuff. So it was amazing when I did leave and it got reported as if I'd knocked back a contract or I chose to leave the club. Again, it didn't really bother me. They can do what they want to do. You know, as a club, I'm not fussed at how they handle themselves. But as long as I know the truth. But I was a little bit surprised as that's the way it was reported, because it certainly wasn't the way that it all happened. But,
so,
yeah.
Would you? I mean, from what you're saying, then, had Di Canio said he wanted you to stay, you would have happily stayed at Swindon. Well,
yeah, because when Di Canio signed, the thing was one, I had interest from other clubs. So obviously I knew Orient wanted me. I knew there was a club up in Scotland that were interested in me as well. So I knew I had interest. But like I've always done throughout my career, is I always want to have all the offers on the table so I can make as good a decision as I can for the rest of my contract that they're offering. So when Di Canio got appointed, I thought, how good would it be to play under Di Canio? How good would it be? He's an absolute legend. And obviously a fantastic player. I knew I was ball boy. Might not have been ball boy, I might be exaggerating. But I remember him being at Celtic, and I remember the big glamour that involved him around there. I remember him playing in the Premier League, and I thought that'd be amazing. So yeah, and I was waiting on getting told whether I was getting kept, whether I wasn't getting kept. And that was the situation. So I never actually had that offer to then make my decision. The decision was kind of made for me. I couldn't stay. They didn't want me. So, yeah, that's how it worked out.
Well, that's cleared that up. So thank you very much indeed for that. That clears up
Right.
any misconceptions and has told how it happened. So then from that, you went on to Leyton Orient, then to Luton, then to Stevenage. And as I was mentioning to you before we started this, my goodness me, your clubs have done all right, haven't they? I mean, my goodness me, what a season you've had from watching from afar, as it were. I mean, Leyton Orient, fabulous under Richie Wellens. Stevenage under every Swindon fan's favourite manager, Steve Evans.
Yeah.
And Luton, what an extraordinary story, because you played against Swindon many, many, many times. And a lot of the teams that have played in the last championship team that Swindon had said the game against Stevenage on a Tuesday night when Swindon won late on 1-0 was probably the most crucial game of that season, because you were dogged that night and Swindon just managed to get the win. Do you remember that one?
No, I can't, honestly. I can't. No, sorry, I can't.
No, fair enough.
Memories escape me.
Yeah, what's it like playing against a former team? How do you deal with that?
That was my first experience of playing against. I never played the first year because I signed for Leyton Orient, and then did Swindon win the league that year? Did Canio get them straight up?
Yeah.
And then we played them on a Tuesday night. That was it. Played them on a Tuesday night. Obviously, Cy Ferry and all that were there. They had a really good team, and I remember it was at Orient, and I get booed off of the, because I was playing right back, so I went out there and I was getting booed off the fans. But I think we drew that game. We played really well. So it's strange because some of the players, obviously you've got a bit of a point to prove, because that manager who's in the opposite dugout and that's his team, he's signed 2 centre backs to effectively replace you. So you want to prove a point that you were good enough to have been kept. But also, sorry, there's players that you've played with, so you've got friends there, people like Cy and Caddy and whatnot. They're my friends, so I kind of knew them. So that was a bit strange playing against them. But then also you were playing against other lads who I never knew, and it was just kind of another team at the end of the day as well. They had a completely different style to what they played like when I was there. So yeah, it was a bit of a mixture of both, mixture of everything really.
Well, you've had a tremendous career. I mean, you know at Woking, so your career continues. But when you look back at your league career, which may well, of course, continue with Woking, who knows if you do well this season.
Mm-hmm.
How pleased are you? Are you satisfied with it? Would you have done more? You've got a few honours. You've got Scotland caps at various levels, of course. You've got Players of the Year, various clubs.
Yeah.
Are you satisfied with it? How do you feel about your league career?
Yeah, I think as a player, you're never probably fully satisfied. You look back and think, what if? You know, I think I hate the word regret. I hate looking back with regret, but I always think regret's only regret if you don't learn from it. And I think I've certainly learnt from my bad experiences, but I look back at, of course, the playoff final at Swindon, losing that. Leyton Orient got to the playoff final, lost on penalties to that. I haven't been 2-0 up at half time as well. So I look back at that and I think, you know, if I'd have achieved promotion to the Championship, it could have been career changing, of course, but it could have been life changing as well. To go and play in the Championship against some really, really good players and teams, and you could have had an opportunity to go to the Premier League, just like Luton have done. So yeah, I'm pleased with the career and whatnot, and obviously it continues. But there's always the kind of little nagging things that you look back in your career and you just think, you know, what if we'd have just done that? What happens if that had just worked out, or if we'd maybe had a little bit more luck? Things could have been a little bit different. But on the other hand, I certainly wouldn't have changed anything. I went to Leyton Orient and met some unbelievable people that I'm still in touch with now. Played for a massive club in Luton and managed to achieve promotion, and then had 4 great years at Stevenage that I met another great bunch of guys that I still keep in touch with as well. So I can't complain.
No, Luton's extraordinary, isn't it? 9 years ago in non-league, now in the Premier League. And for those away fans from Man United and all that lot next season, they're going to face an interesting trip to that away end, aren't they?
They are. It's something else. I've never seen it. I've just saw it in photos. But it's a real old stadium. It's a fantastic stadium. You saw it in the playoff semi-final, how good the atmosphere is. When it's packed and it's rocking, it's a fantastic place to play. And they're a set of supporters that when it's going good, they don't half back their team. So it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be interesting to see some of the big boys show up there and try and play. I heard some rumours that were trying to maybe ground share with some teams round about for a couple of months until they got their renovations done. But I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But I hope they do play at Kenilworth, and I hope they, because it deserves a little crack at the Premier League. The stadium does.
Yeah, it might upset a few of the big boys too, mightn't it?
I think it will.
On the lighter side of life, got a message here from AC. Billy Painter and Simon Ferry turning your house upside down and pulling every prank in the book. Do you remember that?
Si Ferry never. He tells the story as if he done it. He but Billy and Sean Morrison snuck into my house. I lived up at North Swindon, and they snuck into my house and they stole the patio door key, and they went and got another one cut. Came back, put it back in the door, and we played. I always remember we played Wickham away. Wickham away, and I was travelling back up to Scotland after it, and I always remember Si coming into the living room and like panicking, locking the patio door. What are you doing? He was like, I just remembered I left it open. I wanted to make sure because we're going away for the weekend that it's locked. I just didn't think anything of it. Played the game. I think we got beat or we drew. Went back to Glasgow and got ill. I had a sickness bug, and I was in my bed for 2 days up in Scotland. We got the Monday off. I flew back on the Monday. Came back and my house was turned upside down. TV was lying upside down, the couches, the beds, and that way you're feeling ill. I was absolutely fuming. Of course, Si knew about it, but Si tried to stop it by putting the key in the lock, and he never knew that he'd actually done it. Straight away I knew it was they too. They were always up to something, and I was that angry. I walked up the first landing and I put my fist through the wall. I always remember putting my fist through the wall in anger, and I actually put a big hole in the wall. Went straight to my bed, and I must admit I never took that very well. As much as I like the banter, but I never took that great because I was ill. I just wanted to go to my bed.
Fair enough. Well,
and they never apologised. They never apologised, and they never came to clean it up. And I do remind it to them when I see them.
I think you should drop them a note. Yeah, definitely. Well, I'll tell you what, Scott, thank you ever so much for your time. It's been fascinating. Thank you so much. And
no problem.
And I think it's important to clear up possible misconceptions about when players leave the football club, because sometimes that sort of hangs about and people still remember it. But I think you've done that tonight, so really appreciate it, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it. It's good to chat.
No, it's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you very, very much, and thank you. So I contacted you a few days ago, didn't I? So it was brilliant. Thank you. And yes, and all well for Woking next season. We'll keep an eye out on the results and see how you get on. Thank you very
much. Likewise.
Brilliant. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that one. We will see you next Monday. I can't tell you who we'll have on yet, but we will have somebody. And until then, have a lovely week. Bye-bye.
Don't forget Falls Rush in at 9:30 as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah, Falls Rush in, later time, 9:30. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.